What exactly is the psychology of the religious apologist? What mental hoops are they really jumping through? And why can't they see just how asinine the things that they're spewing actually are? Today, I hope to explore at least some of that, even though we all know we're just not going to solve it anytime soon. I don't really know that it can be solved. There's just something exceedingly wrong with these people. Today, we're back to Ligioner Ministries and its founder, R.C. Sproul, as he goes off on atheists once again. You know, those people he's terrified to actually interact with. Instead, he just wants to tell his congregation what we're like, having no direct experience whatsoever, because it isn't like they're going to ask any intelligent questions about any of this, right? What? The religious intelligence? Perish the thought. So, let's get started.
The apostle is saying there is a psychology to atheism.
And how much do you want to bet that this guy not only has no clue what atheism is, he's never actually met a real live atheist in his life? Because that's how this tends to work, isn't it? Religious people who don't have the slightest idea what they're talking about, strutting around on stage, acting like an expert because the people that they're talking to, well, they don't have a clue either. And yes, R.C. Sproul does fit into that category. So please, continue your downward spiral into utter insanity.
Because he goes on to say what it is that we fear more than nature, more than meaninglessness, is that the greatest fear that any human being has by nature is to be held accountable by a God who is holy.
No, not remotely true. In fact, we're not the ones who are terrified to be held accountable. You're just waving your arms around and pretending that you can do whatever you want to do because you've got God on your side. So, magically, whatever you want to do in life suddenly becomes God's will. Get out of the way. Don't impose your rules on us because you're interfering with our religious freedom. Your laws don't apply to us. Right up until the cops show up on your doorstep and haul away your pedophile preacher, and they've got to make excuses for why they aren't complicit in his crimes. You know, those crimes that they always knew about and refused to report. Accountability my ass.
Because in the presence of the holy, we are immediately exposed of being unholy.
That's your claim, at least. But that's all any of this is. Claims. Unsupported, indemonstrable, irrational, and illogical claims based on wishful thinking just because it makes you happy. Organized religion is just a means to control people's actions without having to back any of it up first. This is exactly why you don't see people like this guy standing up in front of a group of atheists and making the same claims. We'd crucify him, metaphorically speaking. We don't buy into his silly claims, and he has no means whatsoever to back them up to anyone with half a brain. So he talks to people who have less than half a brain. People who are just going to blindly believe because someone told them that they're supposed to. And that's pretty damn pathetic if you ask me.
And so the God of Scripture is a God who is omniscient, who knows everything about us. He's a God who is omnipotent, who is all-powerful. He's a God who is altogether holy, and worst of all, He's immutable.
Then explain how he fucked up as badly as he clearly did. because that's not something that the religious are willing or capable of addressing at all. Because if your God knows all from the beginning of time to the end, and he can do absolutely anything, how the hell did we wind up with this complete clusterfuck of a universe? You wouldn't think it was possible because, to anyone with two brain cells to rub together, it isn't. But the religious, well, they just rationalize why their claims don't match up with reality in any way, shape, or form, and then everybody just sits around and goes, hallelujah, because it makes them feel good that someone came up with an explanation before they thought about it and got all uncomfortable and stuff. That's what all of this is about. It has nothing at all to do with brains.
There is no hope that he'll ever grow weak and lose his omnipotence.
Unless you need him to, then God can't do things. You know, like when you need to explain why your all-powerful deity, the one who created all of the concepts of our universe and who can arbitrarily change them at any time, can't make rocks too heavy for him to lift and things like that. Because it sure sounds like your all-powerful deity isn't really all that all-powerful, doesn't it? Your all-good deity spends a lot of time not only allowing evil, but actively creating it. It's desperately trying to have your cake and eat it too. My God can do anything, except for the things that it sure looks like he can't do. So he's omni-special, only when it suits the religious to believe that he is. And that's kind of dumb.
There is no hope that he'll ever have a senior moment and lose his knowledge of everything that I've ever done.
Then why didn't he know that man would rebel against him? Why didn't he know that the universe would be sinful and imperfect when he was creating it and calling it all good? Because it sure sounds like he didn't have a clue what he was doing, right? The Old Testament is a laundry list of everything that God got entirely wrong. And how the hell can he do that if he knows absolutely everything with absolute perfect clarity and he can't be wrong? Explain that one to the class, won't you?
He will never get Alzheimer's disease.
And why do people get it if this all-powerful God of yours didn't create it? Or cancer? And why do children go blind from botfly larvae eating through their eyeballs? Why are there birth defects? Please explain. Because you can't rationally make the case that man decided not to kiss God's ass, so that naturally resulted in a world of horrors. It doesn't work that way. Nothing supposedly happens without God's approval. And that makes God a complete asshole. And you want us to worship this dick. Yeah, fuck that.
There's no hope that he'll ever compromise his righteousness or his holiness.
Unless you need him to, then, well, you know exactly what God is like, right? It's amazing how the religious think that they understand everything, even though they have absolutely no means whatsoever for actually obtaining that knowledge. You know why they know it all? Because they made it all up. Every last bit of it. But can we expect them to be honest about it? Absolutely not.
Because he is immutably holy.
How did you figure that out? What orifice did you yank that out of? It's the question that keeps on giving. How have these people objectively learned any of this, and how have they tested it to find out if their beliefs hold water? Oh wait, they didn't. They found it in a book that they can't verify, and it makes them feel good, so of course it must be true. Except rational people don't operate that way, do they? But these are not rational people.
Immutably omnipotent and immutably omniscient.
Right up to the point when you desperately need him to have limitations. Right up to the time when people point out that your claims about your imaginary friend and the world as we see it, well, they just don't play well together, do they? Then, all of a sudden, God is something different. God isn't really omnipotent. God isn't really omniscient. God has limitations to his immutably limitless characteristics. You know, those characteristics that you just made up and just stapled to God's ass. Seriously, what the hell is wrong with you?
And all of these things are revealed through nature, and we know it by nature.
Oh, there are lots of things revealed through nature, but none of them actually support the existence of your magical super friend. It would be painfully obvious if your beliefs actually represented objective reality, but clearly they don't. This all-powerful Sky Daddy of yours would have known before he did anything that man was incapable of following the ridiculous set of rules that he prescribed. An all-loving God would have either changed the rules or changed mankind so that we could measure up. But did he do either one? Nope, because that would make sense. So instead of just being reasonable, God set up this absurd pretense of having a paradise on earth, right up until the day that Adam and Eve violated the rules that they were incapable of knowing that they couldn't violate. Then God must have personally altered reality to make life shitty. As I said, changing what you think or what you believe or how you behave, that doesn't change the objectively demonstrable physical laws of the universe. God must have done that, knowing full well how it would turn out. God? Dick. You get the idea. Again, why in the world do you worship this moral monster of yours?
And because that is so terrifying, it is our basic disposition as fallen creatures to have a vested interest, to flee since Adam and Eve fled the garden and hid in the bushes because they were naked and they were ashamed.
Because God didn't provide the basic knowledge that they needed. But hey, while we're on the subject, why were they ashamed? They couldn't have felt that way unless there was something to be ashamed of, right? They ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It didn't make being naked evil. It just made them know that it was. So why was it evil? Please answer that, theist, because I'd love to know. Why would God make Adam and Eve do an evil thing just because they were not aware that it was evil? Because these are questions that anyone with any sort of clue ought to be coming up with whenever this religious absurdity shows up. Funny how the religious have no answers, huh?
That's the biggest barrier we have to coming to a full understanding of God, that we too are naked and we know it.
So what? I mean, there's nothing wrong with being naked in general terms. We spend a considerable amount of our lives that way. Are we sinning when we take a shower? Are we sinning when we change clothes? What are the conditions here for being sinfully naked, and how the hell do the religious pretend to understand what they are? That's all they're doing after all. Pretending. What else can they do? Seriously, when you think about it, there really isn't much more that they can do, is there? Because these questions ought to bring the religious philosophizing to a screeching halt as they realize that, yeah, holy shit, atheists have a point. Of course, that will never happen because, as we all know, they just don't care. It doesn't matter if we have a point. It only matters how their beliefs make them feel. It doesn't have to make any sense. It doesn't have to be rationally credible. In fact, it kind of helps if it's not. it isn't like they're going to think about it that hard or, let's be honest, at all. They're just too busy getting that hit of dopamine in the brain to care if any of the crap coming out of their mouths makes the slightest bit of sense. And unfortunately for us, it doesn't. And I say unfortunately for us because they just don't care, and we're often the targets of their irrational stupidity. It isn't their brains that are going to explode in a shower of duh. It's ours. We're the ones who have to listen to it, and we're the ones willing to think about it. And then when it becomes obvious just how spectacularly stupid it all is, we're the ones who have to stand there and ask questions and try to make something remotely rational out of it. They don't. They don't care. The stupidity goes right in one ear and out the other while hitting absolutely nothing in between. I mean, that's religion for you, folks. Why are we the only ones that get it?